Statement by President Joe Biden on Hong Kong's Apple Daily. Apple Daily was this opposition media platform run by this millionaire Jimmy Lai, and basically it was supporting the U.S. government's project of undermining and destabilizing Hong Kong. And now Apple Daily has closed. They closed themselves down because they were under increasing scrutiny from the Chinese government. And of course, the protests are gone. They have permanently ended. The opposition politicians who were conspiring with the US government, they have been removed from Hong Kong's political system. So there really is no reason for Apple Daily to remain in business. But let's see what Joe Biden has to say. It's a sad day for media freedom in Hong Kong and around the world. Intensifying repression by Beijing has reached such a level that Apple Daily, a much-needed bastion of independent journalism in Hong Kong, has now ceased publishing. And of course, the US doesn't care about independent journalism, or else they wouldn't be trying to throw Julian Assange in jail. They wouldn't have already thrown Chelsea Manning in jail, and they wouldn't have forced Edward Snowden to flee the United States and pretty much live in Russia for the rest of his life. So when they say independent journalism, they really mean American propaganda, because that's what Apple Daily was. That's who Jimmy Lai was, an American-backed propagandist. And we have articles like Apple Daily, Hong Kong pro-democracy paper announces closure, and they're acting as if this is a huge blow to free media. But then at the very same time, the US government is seizing dozens of US website domains connected to Iran, and what they're talking about is Iranian news websites. That's what they were shutting down. So at the same time they're complaining about Apple Daily being shut down in China, they shut down several major Iranian news websites. The Chinese government and the Chinese media says that Jimmy Lai is a traitor working with the US government, but you know who else pretty much says the exact same thing, although not in such terms? CNN does. Why pro-democracy troublemaker Jimmy Lai is the only Hong Kong multi-millionaire standing up to China. He's living in China. He's a Chinese citizen living in Hong Kong, and he's standing up to China. What does that even mean? And they talk about his role leading Apple Daily, and they try to portray him as this pro-democracy independent journalist. But here he is in Washington, D.C., talking with then Vice President Mike Pence. And then even CNN itself says that Lai has ties with the United States is undeniable. Last month, he flew to Washington to discuss with U.S. Vice President Mike Pence, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, and National Security Advisor John Bolton how fundamental Hong Kong's freedom is to the U.S.'s standoff with China. The new Cold War is actually a rivalry of competing values, Lai says, framing the current US-China trade war as a standoff between democracy and authoritarianism. We in Hong Kong are fighting for the shared values of the US against China. We are fighting their war in the enemy camp. And that is basically the textbook definition of treason. He is siding with a foreign nation against his own in what he claims is a war. CNN also has a section called A Black Hand for the US, and they're talking about how he has been accused of being a tool of US interference in China, which is exactly what he is. And they admit that his top aide in Hong Kong is an American. His name is Mark Simon, and he was the son of a former CIA employee. What they don't mention in CNN is that Mark Simon himself spent 4 years with U.S. naval intelligence, and now he is the right-hand man of a millionaire anti-government newspaper owner who regularly travels to Washington, D.C. and is part of U.S.-backed protests. Then CNN claims the pro-Beijing lawmaker Tian, for one, believes that Washington pumps money into Hong Kong's democracy movement to provide a continuous force to destabilize China. And then CNN claims he admits he has no evidence to substantiate this claim. And then they have Lai chiming in saying that the idea of a US-funded color revolution is ridiculous. If the US is funding this, the evidence would be so self-evident. And of course, Jimmy Lai is 100% right. It is self-evident. Go to the US government's own National Endowment for Democracy website, go to Hong Kong, China, and look at all of the programs that the US government is funding in Hong Kong, interfering in literally every aspect of Hong Kong's internal political affairs. This is interference the US would never tolerate another nation doing to it. This is what it's doing to China through Hong Kong. So it was going on, and CNN is just covering it up. And Jimmy Lai is doing what every US funded and backed agitator does. They lie about it, they downplay it. And then this is an article about Mark Simon. Hong Kong's loud American defies pro-Beijing smear campaign. And they talk about how he spent 4 years at US Navy intelligence, and that his father was a longtime career CIA agent. And here they quote him as saying, "I have a good job. I have a great boss." He's talking about Jimmy Lai. "I have huge responsibilities, and I'm not going to let a bunch of jackass commies impose things on me." This is an American in China saying that he's not going to have China impose anything on him. He's in somebody else's country, but he's incapable of respecting their sovereignty, essentially. And so the Apple Daily shutting down is a story of China tying up loose ends, this foreign interference, meddling in Hong Kong's internal political affairs, driving violent, destructive riots in the streets for months and months. And that had been actually going on and off for a couple of years. China has ended those protests, those riots permanently. They've uprooted and exposed the US funding and meddling. They've cleared out their political system of these politicians who had compromising ties with foreign governments. And now they're uprooting these foreign-backed propaganda outlets, serving as a vector of foreign interference inside Hong Kong's and China's internal political affairs. And I think Hong Kong serves as a good example for other nations in the region, here in Asia and Southeast Asia in particular, an example to follow in uprooting foreign interference there. Here in Thailand, the US is behind the ongoing anti-government protests here, who were openly linked to the Hong Kong mobs. And in neighboring Myanmar, it's the same story, and they all call themselves the Milk Tea Alliance, and it's essentially a US State Department project. So China's success in uprooting it there in Hong Kong could help instruct ways of uprooting it elsewhere, including here in Thailand. If you thought this video was useful, please like and share it. Think about subscribing. It's free to do, and it helps the channel grow. Check the video description for the links to these articles, as well as to ways you can help support my work, like by becoming a Patreon member. I give my Patreon members extra content. There's lines of communication where we can share ideas and kind of build a community around this work. And to everyone helping me in every way, whether it's single donations or even cryptocurrency, thank you so much. Because without that, this is not possible. So again, thank you very much. And as always, thank you for watching.